Ethan knew precisely why he had been summoned to the Lancaster family's sprawling Connecticut estate. So when the patriarch, Mr. Lancaster, presented him with a stack of glossy, leather-bound portfolios, Ethan's expression remained placid. The older man's smile was a well-practiced work of art, warm and paternal, but it failed to soften the shrewd, piercing gaze that seemed to strip away all pretense. He gestured toward the files, inviting Ethan to look them over, asking for his opinion on which of these omegas might appeal to his son. Liam Lancaster was a man who had been handed the world on a silver platter, power, wealth, and influence that most people couldn't accumulate in a dozen lifetimes. The only thing he couldn't choose was his own marriage. For families like the Lancasters, who occupied the very pinnacle of their social stratosphere, marriage was a transaction. And even though they needed no alliances to fortify their empire, they had no interest in seeing it diluted by someone from the world below. That this conversation was happening with Ethan, and not Liam, was a clear and pointed message. Ethan met the old man's stare, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. He understood what was being asked of him. Their relationship was the worst-kept secret within the Lancaster household. Officially, Ethan was Liam's personal assistant. The emphasis, however, was on personal. They were partners in the boardroom and lovers in the bedroom, a synergy that was both efficient and intense, but it had its limits. Liam was a top-tier alpha, and Ethan was a male beta with a notoriously low fertility rate. There was no future for them, a fact Ethan had accepted long ago. He had never once confessed his feelings, even in their most intimate moments, burying his emotions under a layer of professional restraint. But the Lancasters were a dynasty obsessed with appearances. With a strategic marriage on the horizon, all other entanglements had to be neatly severed. Ethan accepted the stack of profiles with a respectful nod, his fingers tracing the embossed crest on the first folder. He felt Mr. Lancaster's posture relax, a subtle release of tension in his shoulders. As Ethan began to methodically review the candidates, analyzing their lineage, education, and temperaments, his mind drifted. He thought of Liam, of the low, husky murmur against his ear in the dark, the hot breath on his neck, and the possessive words whispered like secrets. A faint cough escaped his lips, pulling him back to the present. He carefully selected four profiles he deemed most suitable and presented them. Mr. Lancaster accepted the chosen few, setting them aside without a single glance. He already had a candidate in mind. This was merely theater designed to inform Ethan that his time was up. It was to retreat gracefully. Liam held the real power now, having wrested control of the company from his father with a ruthlessness that had become legendary in the business world. The Lancasters bred their children to be sharks, teaching them to fight for every scrap of power until only the strongest remained. Liam, who had conquered the family empire at the age of 20, was the most formidable shark of all. It was far easier to persuade Ethan to leave than to confront Liam directly. Mr. Lancaster then sweetened the deal, mentioning how long Ethan had been with the company and lamenting Liam's failure to promote him. He spoke of a new division opening on the West Coast, run by Liam's older brother, Nathan. The position of vice president was his for the taking. The implication was clear. Nathan, an alpha rendered sterile by a genetic defect, had been exiled from the succession race years ago. The old man was trying to pair the two non-breeders off, a neat solution to two inconvenient problems. He was evidently unaware that Nathan had already found his own Omega in California. Masking his true feelings behind a look of profound gratitude, Ethan solemnly agreed to accept the chairman's generous arrangement. Just as the words left his mouth, the heavy oak doors of the study swung open. Liam stood silhouetted in the doorway, his face a mask of cool displeasure. He demanded to know what was being arranged, his gaze locking onto Ethan. He reminded them both that Ethan was his, and that he took orders from no one else. Mr. Lancaster subtly slid the Omega profiles into a drawer in the coffee table, his movements smooth and practiced. He feigned surprise at his son's unannounced arrival. Liam's eyes flickered to the drawer for a fraction of a second before returning to his father. His voice laced with ice as he pointed out that his father hadn't bothered to inform him before summoning his assistant. He then turned his sharp gaze back to Ethan, who was still seated. A frustrated sound escaped Liam's lips. He snapped at Ethan, asking if his legs were broken, and ordered him to come. Ethan quickly gathered his belongings and followed Liam out to the car. The drive back to the city was silent. As the Aston Martin descended into the subterranean garage of Liam's penthouse, the engine died and the locks clicked shut, trapping Ethan in the sudden, oppressive quiet. He looked at Liam, whose face was cast in shadow, his eyes dark and unreadable. Liam demanded to know what his father had said. Ethan's body tensed for a moment before he offered a vague, dismissive answer about a routine inquiry into Liam's well-being. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken accusation, the air growing thick with a chilling pressure that made it hard to breathe. When Ethan reached for the window controls, a hand shot out, grabbing his wrist and pinning it above his head. Liam leaned over, his body pressing Ethan down into the plush leather seat. He whispered, his voice dangerously soft, that this was Ethan's last chance to tell the truth. Ethan was a terrible liar. The greatest deception he had ever managed was convincing Liam he didn't love him. Any other falsehood crumbled under Liam's intense scrutiny, so he said nothing. A humorless laugh escaped Liam's lips. He tilted Ethan's chin up, his tone shifting from persuasion to menace, remarking that such disobedience required correction. Then his mouth crashed down on Ethan's, a punishing, bruising kiss that stole the air from his lungs. He bit down on Ethan's lip, a deliberate act of retribution, and Ethan could only cling to him, lost in the storm. He awoke the next day around noon, his body aching and covered in marks. A dull throb emanated from a very specific, sensitive area. He sighed. The signs were unmistakable. Liam's rut was close. Though Ethan couldn't smell the alpha pheromones, years of experience had taught him to recognize the prelude. Liam's possessiveness would spike, his behavior growing more intense, each bite and touch feeling like an attempt to consume him whole, to merge their very beings. The rut of a top-tier alpha was a brutal affair, an explosive cocktail of emotional instability and overpowering desire. Ethan had planned to leave after it passed, but Mr. Lancaster's calls were becoming more insistent. The last one had been stripped of all pretense, his voice hard with impatience. He questioned Ethan's delay, accusing him of wanting to see Liam childless, of wanting to single-handedly destroy the Lancaster legacy. Ethan had no response. He knew their story had no happy ending. He had known it since college, when Liam, in the throes of his first rut, had mistaken him for an Omega and tried to form a mating bond. When Liam had come to his senses and offered to take responsibility, Ethan had coldly informed him that a Beta could not be bonded with, and that he didn't like him anyway, so no responsibility was necessary. But had his heart never wavered? It had. It had shattered the day Liam's stepbrother had used Ethan as bait, a knife pressed to his throat. They had forced Liam to his knees, beating him with iron rods until he collapsed. Yet through the pain, Liam had offered Ethan a reassuring smile, his jaw tight to keep from crying out. It reminded Ethan of the first time they met, in a grimy alleyway behind their high school. Liam, aloof and indifferent, had stumbled upon a group of bullies shaking Ethan down for lunch money. He had dispatched them with brutal efficiency. Afterward, standing over him, Liam had offered, in his clipped, cool way, to teach him how to fight. Noticing Ethan's worn-out canvas sneakers, he'd added that it would be free. People said Liam Lancaster was cold, that he lacked empathy. But from that day on, he had become the single point of light in Ethan's bleak world. And Ethan had loved him for it. Now, that same strong back was being broken for his sake. As he watched Liam bleed onto the pavement, he had sworn to himself that if Liam survived, he would be with him, no matter what. But before he could ever voice that love, he learned of Liam's ambition to seize the Lancaster throne. A leader needed an heir. Their relationship twisted, settling into its current, undefined state. Liam's vigilance over Ethan intensified after the meeting with his father, but as the days passed without incident, he began to relax. A business trip to London came up. As Ethan packed Liam's suitcase, Liam leaned against the doorframe, watching him with an unreadable expression. Finally, he crossed the room, wrapping his arms around Ethan from behind, trapping him in a warm embrace. He nuzzled the side of Ethan's neck, his voice a soft murmur. Yet the question he posed was laden with meaning. He asked if Ethan would always be by his side. For a terrifying moment, Ethan thought he knew that his plan to leave had been discovered. But no one knew except him and Mr. Lancaster. Glancing at their reflection in the large bedroom mirror, he saw Liam's face was calm, serene. He asked why Liam would ask such a thing. Liam inhaled deeply at his neck, a familiar habit despite Ethan's lack of assent, and pressed a light kiss there that sent a shiver through Ethan's entire body. Liam's voice remained even, saying he didn't know, that he just had a feeling Ethan might disappear. He asked for his promise again. Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. He covered Liam's hands with his own, his voice steady as he promised he would never leave. Liam was silent for a long moment before his grip tightened. He told Ethan not to lie to him. Swallowing the bitterness that rose in his throat, Ethan feigned lightness, telling him to let go so he could finish packing. Appeased by the promise, Liam relented. Ethan carefully checked the box of rut suppressants before placing it in the suitcase. Liam spoke again, his tone becoming petulant, declaring that his rut was coming and that Ethan should accompany him. He didn't want the suppressants. The more unreasonable he became, the closer the rut was. Fearing Liam might actually drag him along, Ethan soothed him patiently, reminding him of his responsibilities at the office. He pointed out that it was only for a couple of days, joking about where he could possibly run off to. The words caught in his throat, and his eyes suddenly burned with unshed tears. Liam noticed the shift and looked at him with concern. Ethan quickly buried his face in Liam's chest, hiding his expression as he patted his back comfortingly. He whispered for him to stop being difficult, promising he would be waiting for his return. The ruse seemed to work. Liam was calm all the way to the airport. Ethan watched him pass through the security gate, then immediately turned and headed home. His belongings were numerous. Over the years, his life had become intertwined with Liam's, filling the penthouse. But when faced with the task of leaving, he found he could fit all that truly mattered into a single small suitcase. After packing, he left his resignation letter on the desk in Liam's study. He took one last look around the home they had shared for nearly 6 years, a place filled with so many memories. He was not Liam's destiny. With a quiet sigh, he closed the door behind him and walked away without looking back. He had no intention of going to the West Coast. He had saved a considerable amount of money and planned to travel the world before settling down somewhere quiet. But as he waited at the airport, a strange feeling of unease settled over him. Despite the June heat, a cold sweat broke out on his skin. It felt as if 1,000 unseen eyes were watching him. He scanned the bustling terminal, but no one paid him any mind. The feeling persisted, a knot of anxiety tightening in his gut. When his flight was called for boarding, and nothing had happened, he started to relax. But as he approached the gate, several men in sharp black suits materialized out of the crowd, surrounding him. He knew the one in the lead all too well, the head of Liam's personal security detail. The man informed him, with practiced politeness, that Mr. Lancaster had a few things he wished to discuss. The truth crashed down on him. The business trip was a lie. Liam had known about his plan all along and had set a trap to see if he would go through with it. That explained his strange behavior, which Ethan had mistaken for pre-rut paranoia. The guards escorted him to a private VIP lounge. Liam was there, sitting on a sofa with his eyes closed. He opened them slowly at the sound of their entry, his gaze sweeping over Ethan, as cold and sharp as shards of ice. A wave of his hand dismissed the security team. Before Ethan could utter a word, Liam was on him, slamming him against the wall, his hand clamped firmly on the back of his neck. His sharp canine teeth grazed the sensitive skin there, his voice a low, chilling whisper. He wondered aloud if Liam's inability to properly mark him was the reason Ethan kept forgetting who he belonged to. A cold dread washed over Ethan, and he cried out Liam's name, begging him to stop. His greatest fear was this, a forced, improper marking. He was not an Omega. He remembered the first time, during Liam's uncontrolled rut, when his neck had been left a bloody, mangled mess. Afterward, he had made Liam promise never to do it again. Liam thought it was only because of the pain, but it was more than that. The act itself was a brutal reminder of what they could never be, a jolt of reality that plunged him into a spiral of despair. Liam let out a derisive snort, his voice a low growl. He mused on what else he could do, since a simple mark wasn't enough to make Ethan remember his place, enough to stop him from running. His fingers moved to unbutton Ethan's shirt, exposing his throat completely. Ethan's resistance crumbled, his voice breaking as he pleaded with him, begging him to use a suppressant, to calm down so they could talk. Liam's response was flat and merciless. He had given Ethan a chance, and he had thrown it away. Without another word, his teeth sank into the tender flesh of Ethan's neck. An overwhelming flood of alpha pheromones poured into his system. His head swam, consciousness blurring at the edges as his body went limp. But he knew this was just the beginning. An alpha in his rut was already volatile. An alpha consumed by rage was a force of nature. This state of uncontrolled fury could last for 7 days and 7 nights. Fighting through the dizziness, Ethan tried to reason with what little was left of Liam's sanity, hoping to calm the storm, or at least lessen its intensity. He managed to choke out Liam's name, but a hand immediately clamped over his mouth, and the teeth in his neck bit down harder, a punishment for his defiance. A sharp hiss of pain escaped him, muffled against Liam's palm. He knew Liam heard it. In the past, even in the depths of his rut, the sound of Ethan's pain would have been enough to make him stop, to gentle his touch. But now he only heard a cold grunt in response. Liam moved to his ear, his eyes dark with a chilling possessiveness. He told Ethan to remember this pain, promising that the next time he tried to leave, he would tear the flesh from his bones and swallow it whole. He asked, his voice a terrifying caress, if that was what it would take to make Ethan stay. A shiver of pure fear ran down Ethan's spine. He knew it was the rut talking, but the words still felt like ice in his veins. Sensing his trembling, Liam loosened his grip, pulling Ethan's shaking body against his own solid, warm chest. He asked why he was afraid, murmuring that all Ethan had to do was stay. Then his mouth covered Ethan's again, swallowing his pleas and dragging them both down into a maelstrom of raw, desperate passion. When he finally regained full consciousness, he had no idea how many days had passed. Liam was sitting on the edge of the bed, gently applying salve to the raw, bloodied marks on his neck. The tenderness of the gesture was a stark contrast to the violence that had inflicted the wounds. Ethan couldn't help a bitter twist of his lips. He thought it was a shame Liam hadn't shown such care when he was biting him. Liam saw the small movement and his eyebrow arched coldly. He asked if Ethan was displeased. From his calm demeanor, Ethan knew the rut had passed. Emboldened, he decided not to hold back. He demanded to know if Liam had bugged his phone that night. Liam admitted it without a trace of guilt. Ethan slammed a fist on the mattress, his anger flaring. He reminded Liam that he was supposed to be getting married, asking what he was supposed to do, stick around and be the other man. Liam's face darkened instantly. He shot back that Ethan had some nerve, asking how it felt to personally select his replacement. Ethan's eyes widened in shock. Liam sneered, revealing that he knew everything, how Ethan had carefully studied each profile, selecting the 4 most suitable Omegas. He also knew about his father's offer, the job with his brother, and that Ethan had agreed to it. As he spoke, his voice grew more dangerous. Sensing the shift, Ethan tried to steer the conversation back, insisting the core issue was Liam's impending marriage and the need to end their ambiguous relationship. A sharp sting bloomed across his backside as Liam swatted him. He yelped in pain as Liam grabbed his chin, his voice a low, furious snarl. He demanded to know what was so ambiguous about their relationship. After more than a decade together, since the first time Liam had marked him, he had considered Ethan his partner. He had accepted that Ethan claimed not to love him, deciding to be patient. Now, he was being told their relationship was ambiguous. He shouted, asking if Ethan would prefer to call them friends with benefits. His volume rose with the last sentence, and Ethan fell silent, his guilt palpable. Liam let out a humorless, angry laugh. It seemed ambiguous was a generous term in Ethan's mind. All this time, Liam had seen him as his mate, while Ethan was probably telling the world he was just a casual hookup. Ethan mumbled that he hadn't told anyone. Liam's rage boiled over. He yelled that of course Ethan wouldn't tell anyone, not when he was so eager to see Liam married off with an heir. He accused Ethan of being disgusted by him, of celebrating the news of the arranged marriage as a chance to finally be free. He threw Ethan's past words back at him, questioning if he ever would have slept with him if he hadn't been drunk that first time. He accused Ethan of wanting to leave for a long time, which was why he had been so determined to go. Ethan opened his mouth to explain, to deny it all, but then he stopped. This was his chance. He knew the immense pressure Liam was under, the constant battle he fought to maintain his position. He couldn't let them find a weakness, and a childless beta partner was the biggest weakness of all. He took a deep breath, met Liam's pained, angry eyes, and spoke with a chilling sincerity. Yes. The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. He told Liam he had never loved him. He claimed that if he hadn't been drunk and too embarrassed to back out, he never would have let their relationship become physical. A gasp escaped him as Liam suddenly flipped him onto his stomach, delivering 2 sharp smacks before rolling him back over. He bit down hard on Ethan's collarbone, a sharp, punitive sting. Just as Ethan was about to cry out in protest, he felt something hot and wet splash against his skin. A tear. And then another. He froze. Liam Lancaster did not cry. Not when he was beaten half to death, not ever. Ethan had never seen it. A wave of shock and heartache washed over him. He started to raise a hand to comfort him but stopped himself. He couldn't afford to be weak now. He remained perfectly still, letting the tears fall. Sensing his cold indifference, Liam's crying ceased. He looked up, the grief in his eyes replaced by an icy resolve. A bitter, mocking smile touched his lips. He called Ethan cruel. Wiping his face with a rough motion, Liam's expression turned terrifyingly grim. He said if marriage was what Ethan wanted, then he would get married. But he would be the one to choose his spouse. He told Ethan that it didn't matter if Ethan was disgusted by him or didn't love him, because he was bound to Liam for life. As long as Liam was alive, he would never let him go. He advised Ethan to learn to love him, because he would continue to do all the things Ethan found so repulsive, and Ethan would be the one to suffer. With that, he stormed out of the penthouse, leaving Ethan alone and stunned. In the days that followed, Liam did not return. The penthouse became a luxurious prison, staffed by beta bodyguards. In a move of petty cruelty, Liam had the chef put cilantro, a food Ethan despised, in every one of his meals. He knew Liam was trying to force him to call, to break down and apologize. Liam was easy to soothe. A soft word, a small act of submission, and his anger would melt away. But Ethan held firm. Meanwhile, the gossip blogs exploded. The heir to the Lancaster fortune was going to marry a low-status, infertile male beta. The theories were wild. Ethan was a master manipulator who had blackmail material on Liam. He had used some strange, hypnotic power to trap him. The consensus was that either Ethan was a villain or Liam had lost his mind. One day, Mr. Lancaster called, his voice booming with fury. He raged about his son's defiance, how Liam had publicly challenged any of the family elders to try and take his position from him if they dared. He then turned his anger on Ethan, berating him for getting caught so easily, for provoking Liam into this rampage. He complained that Liam had destroyed half the family estate in a fit of rage. Finally, his anger spent, he pleaded with Ethan, admitting he had lost control of his son. He told Ethan that he was the only one Liam would listen to, and begged him to talk some sense into him. Ethan sighed. He knew Liam wasn't bluffing. Since taking over, he had elevated Lancaster Corp to a level of dominance his competitors could only dream of. No one could challenge him. But Liam was forgetting that without an heir, his reign had a time limit. Once he grew old, the wolves would descend. Steeling himself, Ethan finally dialed Liam's number. It rang for a long time before Liam answered, his silence on the other end of the line a challenge. Ethan spoke first, his voice deliberately cold. He asked Liam what the hell he was doing, if he hadn't caused enough chaos. Liam's voice exploded with frustration. He yelled back, asking what was so wrong with wanting to marry the person he loved. He raged against the family's control, declaring that he had earned his position, not inherited it, and they had no right to dictate his life. Ethan's response was a knife twist. Then marry an Omega you love. A chilling laugh echoed down the line. An Omega he loved? He asked Ethan if he truly had no heart, if he didn't know who Liam loved, who he had always loved. The pain in his voice was raw. Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat, keeping his own tone flat and clinical. He suggested that Liam was merely fixated on him because he was his first. He told him to try being with an Omega, that he would discover it was what he truly wanted. The line went quiet, followed by the distant sound of shattering glass. Liam's voice, when it returned, was a raw, broken roar, demanding that Ethan repeat himself. Ethan knew he was pushing him too far, but he had to sever this for good. He repeated his words, adding that Liam was wasting his time on him, that his persistence was only making him feel disgusted. Another laugh, this one hollow and filled with a pain that was almost physical to hear. When Liam finally spoke, his voice was a wrecked whisper. He told Ethan that if this was what he truly wanted, he would grant his wish. Then he hung up. Ethan stood frozen, the dead phone clutched in his hand, biting his lips so hard he tasted blood. This was for the best. This was how things were supposed to be. Shortly after the call, the bodyguards disappeared. Ethan picked up the suitcase he had packed weeks before and left the penthouse for the last time. A month later, he stood numbly outside a clinic, a medical report clutched in his trembling hand. The doctor had said he was nearly 5 weeks pregnant. The timing was unmistakable. It had happened at the airport. The one thing that had driven him away from Liam, his inability to provide an heir, was no longer true. He stared at the familiar number on his phone screen. In the past month, Liam had scrubbed all news of a wedding from the internet and had not been seen with any Omegas. He appeared frequently in the financial news, his expression colder than ever, his eyes devoid of their former warmth. He must hate Ethan now. After everything Ethan had said, he had every right to. Hesitantly, he pressed the call button. It rang for what felt like an eternity. Just as he was about to give up, the call connected. Liam's voice was flat, professional. "What is it?" Ethan's own voice was small when he answered. "I'm pregnant." There was a sharp, audible intake of breath on the other end, a momentary loss of composure, but when Liam spoke again, his tone was steady. He stated that the child would be raised by him. The coldness, so foreign from the man he knew, made Ethan's voice crack with unshed tears. He asked him why. Liam's reply was laced with a pained bitterness, suggesting that since Ethan found him so disgusting, he surely wouldn't want his child. The words, echoing his own cruel lies, broke him. He stammered, trying to explain that it wasn't true, asking if Liam would be willing to listen. He didn't expect much. He had shattered Liam's pride time and again. But Liam's voice cut in soft for the first time. He said that if he hadn't wanted to listen, he never would have answered the phone. In that moment, it was as if no time had passed at all. He was still the Liam who, despite his fury, would always give Ethan a chance to explain. And so, Ethan told him everything, the pressure, the fear for Liam's future, the self-sacrifice born of a deep, desperate love. On the other end, Liam flicked a lighter open and then snapped it shut, tossing it onto a desk. He sounded bewildered, angry, and utterly confused, asking if that was really why Ethan had left. Ethan tried to argue that an heir was important, but Liam cut him off fiercely. He said that without an heir, he was still powerful enough to keep everyone in line. He confessed that the only reason he fought for control of the family was to protect Ethan. If he had known that position would cause Ethan so much pain, he would have gladly thrown it all away. A choked apology escaped Ethan's lips. Liam sighed, a sound heavy with exhaustion. He told him they would put it behind them, then asked for his location. His voice turned hard again, a threat layered with affection, as he warned Ethan that if he ever tried to push him away again for his own good, he would not be forgiven so easily. A sense of peace washed over Ethan as he agreed. Liam arrived quickly. He looked thinner, the lines around his eyes deeper. Ethan stepped forward to embrace him, but Liam caught him first, his hand tangling in Ethan's hair as he pulled him into a desperate, unending kiss. When they finally broke apart, Liam buried his face in Ethan's neck, his voice muffled and thick with emotion. He called him a heartless fool, confessing that he had been on the verge of losing his mind. Ethan stroked his back, his own voice soft. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. "Let's go home." Liam held him tighter. "Yes," he whispered. "We're going home." Liam never understood why he had saved the quiet boy in the alley. He had grown up without a mother's love and with a father's neglect, ignorant of what it meant to care for someone. But from the first moment he saw Ethan, something inside him shifted. Later, when an Omega confessed their feelings to Ethan, and Ethan gently rejected them, wiping away their tears, a possessive fire had ignited within Liam, triggering his first rut. He had been desperate to mark Ethan, to claim him so the whole world would know he was his. But he couldn't, so he kept him close, a constant presence by his side. Still, Ethan refused to define their relationship, leaving Liam feeling powerless to ward off potential rivals. It wasn't until he became the head of the Lancaster family that his words carried enough weight to keep others at bay. It took years of patient, relentless effort, but he finally convinced Ethan to marry him. And when their wedding was broadcast live across the globe, Liam could finally, and publicly, declare to the world that Ethan was and always had been his.